Hello, everyone. Here at Growth Hackers, it's a pleasure today to have Morgan Brown here with us. Morgan, most people know him. If you're in growth for a few years now, you know that he's now the Vice President of Growth Marketing at Shopify, where he's responsible for Shopify's merchant growth. Prior to Shopify, he was a Director of Product at Facebook, working in the Messenger organization. He's also the author of Hacking Growth, How Today's Fastest Growing Companies Drive Breakout Success, along with our co-founder, Sean Ellis. Morgan has spent his career helping companies of all sizes grow at the intersection of digital marketing and product development. And Morgan is here with us today. Such a pleasure to have you here, Morgan.
Thanks for having me, Amelia. It's super exciting to be back and to get to hang out with you and talk growth.
Definitely, yeah. We were talking prior to coming in live. We were just talking about how companies 10 years after growth has been a very, it seems to be established team and area and topic now, but at the same time, many companies are still struggling to establish a process and to get their everything together, even the team together to run the growth operations. And what do you think about that? You being one of the people there that have coined the term growth hacking. So what do you think about that? 2021, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we do still have a long way to go. I think the brand of growth and the idea of growth has kind of gone much further than the actual operation and execution of growth. I think there are a lot of legacy elements that people are trying to think through and how to fix, like legacy mindsets about how marketing and product work, legacy mindsets about how digital marketing works. Legacy mindsets or legacy business structures, whether it's organizational structures or business units set up in one way or another, legacy data systems that actually don't give you all of the insights you need to run the rapid innovation, high tempo testing process. So yeah, I think there's a lot of still a lot of ground to go. And even when you look at all sorts of different companies, they're at various different stages in that process. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of work ahead to be done. And I think, which is exciting because that means there's a lot of opportunities still to be unlocked for companies by adopting this process.
Before we go to the questions of our community, we have tons of questions here for you, and hopefully we can go through most of them in 1 hour. Yeah, but sure. We just launched the State of Growth 2021, and there's two insights that I wanted to discuss with you briefly before we go into the other questions. The first one is exactly what you said. The majority of the teams are still struggling. They report their main challenge to be establishing and following the growth process. 51% of them across all industries and segments say that. And the second insight that I wanted to share with you is the correlation we found between the teams that grow the most and the amount of experiments they run. Not the amount of experiments that go right or that work, but the actual amount of experiments they run. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a great... So I love that you all have done this research. And I think, one of the benefits of the community is kind of learning from people that are, in the field, actually doing the work, sharing where they're at so that we can kind of level set and understand. So definitely love the report and all of that. And I do think, one of the things that Sean and I said in our book, and I think it's kind of a historical kind of old business adage, is that the teams that learn the fastest grow the fastest, right? And experimentation really is a form of learning. There are other ways to learn, of course. Experimentation is one of many different ways. But Alex Schultz at Facebook famously said, "Hey, if you're shipping code every week and your competitor's shipping code every other week, you're creating a compounding advantage of speed and learning that is kind of far beyond that competitor. And over time, that gap will widen and widen because it's learning is a compounding asset. Jeff Bezos also talks about the need to go go fast and go faster, and that most decisions are reversible. Of course, there are some decisions that are not reversible, and you have to slow down and take those really seriously. But for the most part, there is operational slack or speed that can be gained, and that driving that learning loop faster is a way to get ahead. One of the things that I always hear, though, is people say things like, "Well, it's a marathon; it's not a sprint." And my answer there is like, well, the world record holder for a marathon now runs it in under 2 hours. Marathons used to be run in 4 hours and 5 hours. So even marathons are run faster. And so I think it's really valuable. That said, there is a lot of organizational challenges depending on any level in the organization that you sit at. Even as a vice president, there's challenges getting everyone aligned. If you're working on a small team, you might wonder, how I can advocate for, kind of a different approach to working and that type of thing. So the challenges are very real for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And we have so many questions here from the community. And one of them is about how, if you have a method or a framework, and I know you do, to organize and prioritize your growth initiatives. It comes from Raul Nialani. And what are you using currently at Shopify, and why do you use this framework?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks, Raul, for the question. I think in Hacking Growth, we talked about a framework called ICE, Impact, Confidence, and Ease. Some teams use that today. The Spotify premium team uses ICE, but there's also lots of other frameworks out there for sure. There's Pi and the Conversion XL framework, and Shopify. We have our own framework. At Facebook, we had our own process and framework. But I think so you can most of these frameworks generally are trying to do the same thing, which is to help you make a educated prioritization of all the things you could do, right? Most of us work in environments that are like, we're resource constrained. We don't have all the money in the world. We don't have all the time in the world. And so we need to prioritize and pick the best things that we could do. And so what we're trying to do is bring some logical and structured thinking to how we build that prioritization. So, so if you take ICE as kind of a starting point, but really you can take any of these, when you're thinking about impact, what you're really talking about is the opportunity size of this initiative, right? It's kind of like, what will I get in terms of my ultimate like North Star business outcomes for this effort versus everything else. So opportunity sizing existing traffic, you want to think about, okay, I have this audience coming in and they convert at these different steps at this rate. Like which step is most meaningful to change? And, if I can change step A by 5%, is that better than changing step B by 10% or whatever? And so you basically want to do this opportunity sizing to kind of get the estimated impact. And if you're talking about a brand new audience, then you want to think about total addressable market, product market fit, how many people, the market penetration, and kind of do the opportunity sizing that way. So that's really how I think about the impact piece. And you can do that in a bunch of ways. On the confidence side, this is really about how strongly you believe in your convictions. Like, what is the evidence that suggests that this idea and this opportunity size is actually something that you can achieve? And so being really intellectually honest with yourself about, hey, do I think this, is this a big bet? Is this, kind of something that is like, it might pay off, but we're not really sure? Or is this something I know really for certain will work? And I think one of the criticisms that I hear a lot about impact, confidence, and ease is confidence kind of seems like a very subjective figure that lets you kind of like move the numbers around. But really, that's not the intent of it. What you want to do is you want to say, from a confidence side, very high confidence ideas are things that you have like causally measured to matter, right? So an A/B experiment that proves out that, you know, you causally impacted this thing is very high confidence. A hunch that you have is very low confidence. Then you have things like, well, if you have user feedback, that gives you a little more confidence. If you have a qualitative survey, that gives you more confidence. If you have correlational data, that gives you a little bit more confidence. And so that's kind of the confidence piece. And then the ease piece is really the cost. So you have an opportunity and you have a cost. And then you want to figure out a way to take those three inputs, and you can cut it across many different dimensions if you want based on your business, and then hopefully give you kind of a sort order of the things that are likely to be most impactful. And you can't do that in a vacuum, right? You have to really understand how your business grows. What are the main inputs to your business? What are the main pain points and leverage points in that growth loop, that growth system, and use that to kind of drive the prioritization and where you want to focus your efforts. So that's a very long answer, but
yeah, no, it's super complete. Thank you for being so thorough. And it really changes even the same initiative, the same hypothesis, the same idea with a certain scorecard, a certain ICE score. How you look at it, it really changes according to the moment of the business. So I completely agree with you there when you say you have to have a good grasp. Let's just say you're in the beginning of the year, of the quarter, you have your budget right there open to you. But by the end of the year or the end of the quarter, you have a fast-paced need for to show some results. And there, the same ICE score in the same idea can be prioritized or not according to the moment, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think of growth much like investing or like, you know, investing in kind of money management, where some things you want to have really safe bets, things that you know are going to work, right? We keep our money in a bank account, we put it in a 401k, you know, we put it in an index fund, like you kind of these safe, knowable things. And then you probably want some portion of your portfolio to be in bigger bets where, like, sure, it might fail, but it might, you know, really grow. And I think it's really kind of figuring out the balance. And to your point, Amelia, it can really matter where you're at in your business stage, life cycle, quarter, whatever. But I always try to think of like all the work we're doing in growth as a portfolio of investment. And I don't want to be overinvested in big bets because there's really high variance and many of them will fail by definition because they're a bet. But there's many optimizations that are like high likelihood, but we don't want to just optimize because we don't want to get to that local maxima and peter out. So you have to kind of have that distribution, I think.
Definitely. And we see that the teams that better perform, this is according to the state of growth as well. It's a couple of years since we started doing this research, and the results always correlate to the high performing teams not having the highest amount of experiments that work. It's like quite the opposite. It's because they're taking risks, right? If you're not taking risks, you end up not growing that much.
Yeah, and growth is hard, right? It's as Toby Lukey, who's the CEO of Shopify, says, you know, experiments are a discovery of like what doesn't work, right? And and I think like I'm a huge baseball fan, and in baseball, if you get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you will be in the Hall of Fame. You will be remembered as one of the best baseball players ever, which means by definition, you're failing at your job 7 out of 10 times. And so I think it's similar in growth where you have to, you are seeking to discover what doesn't work, and you're trying to objectively find what does. And even though there's lots of failure involved, it's kind of that process towards discovering, you know, what really matters.
So if you're starting to work in growth, you're joining a growth team right now. There's people watching us that are doing that. I bet they gotta build the resilience. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think resilience, being like really objectively looking at your work objectively, being able to like detach your personal value from the work is really important. And so that you can be really honest about what's working and what's not working. when I was at Facebook, I was working on a team where we tried for 6 months to kind of figure something out. At the 6-month mark, it wasn't working. We said, we're going to give ourselves 3 more months to figure it out. And at the end of that time period, we didn't. And so we went to our bosses and we're like, hey, we tried all these things. None of them worked. We think that even if we did get some things that look promising to work, it wouldn't be meaningful enough to actually get us to where we want to go. And so we want to shut down this work stream and try a new approach. And that was celebrated as a win, because we kind of validated that the original strategy just wasn't going to be successful, and we could like definitively close that off. So yeah, you have to be experiments that are negative or losers are really valuable and meaningful, and they should be celebrated as advancing your learning.
You're not spending all the money on that new project, and you're experimenting first and learning first. I have a lot of concepts and ideas to share about that, but let's do that in a minute. I have another question here from Claudia Lechner, and she asks, what skill sets or functional roles does your growth team have? You have 200 people under you, so I bet you all the kinds of.
I have a big organization. Yeah. So I have, like you said, I have 200 people in my org. So we have a lot of skills and roles. So we have really great channel specialists. So you think on the acquisition side, we have exceptional paid marketing and performance marketing teams that work on, paid search, paid social, affiliates, all of that stuff. We have great content and SEO teams. We have a content marketing team that has a huge editorial arm. They have, writers, SEO specialists, video producers, so on and so forth. And then we have our product managers, engineers. We have conversion rate optimization. We have email marketing, lifecycle marketing. So really, it is like the full growth apparatus. But I think to kind of like distill it down into like maybe how you might want to think about the skills that you want on your team, because obviously, not everyone's dealing with 200 people, but I think it's thinking about what are the biggest ways that your company currently grows, or you believe it should grow, right? So if it is performance marketing, like paid media, then you want to think about, okay, do I have like the right talent and team structure to unlock that channel? So that would mean having great performance, like great paid search people that really know the channel exceptionally well. And then what are the complementary skills they need to like do their job and really unlock the value of that? So you obviously want some design and engineering to work on creative and landing page optimization and that type of thing. You want some great data analysis to really understand which campaigns, keywords, landing page combinations are leading to the best outcomes for you. You want some conversion rate optimization experience so that you can figure out what are the best experiments that you can run across that whole user journey to make it effective. So I think if you go to kind of first principles around, this is the way my business grows, understanding within that what are the big inputs to making that better, and then staffing around that is kind of how I would think about approaching it for any company.
That's amazing. And Andrew Kaplan here asks something related to the other side of the spectrum, early stage companies looking to start growth teams. What is the hardest part of that for them? I believe not having all the resources to do everything that you just described is one thing. And what else are they going to face?
For sure. So I think there's there's a couple of key points here. One is most early stage companies should really ask themselves if they need a growth team or not right away, right? Like if you're a pre-product market fit, you probably want to spend a lot of time figuring out how to get to product market fit before you really bring a team in to kind of try to drive a lot of growth. Early founding members of a company should really think about growth as something that they should understand, learn, and do, because they have an idea of how their product should show up in the world, how it's going to work. And so If you talk to Sean or listen to Sean speak when he talks about the work he did at Dropbox and Eventbrite, like those founders were leading the growth teams. They were working with their head of product, their engineering lead and then they brought in some outside expertise to really help them get that ball rolling. But, Sean worked there for a period of time and helped get the mindset and the culture right. But they really did it with kind of the founding team. So I think there's a question of like when you bring in a growth team based on where your product is. And then I think early companies really don't know what is going to be the main way that they grow. And so I think you have to kind of have a team that's able to do some experiments and put in some effort in kind of these different approaches to see which one is actually going to resonate and drive it forward. So there's concepts of like, there's product market fit. There's also product channel fit. There's language market fit. So really it's kind of this early discovery process that is hard. And in that early stage, you're not really optimizing anything because you don't have anything to optimize. You're really trying to go from like first principles and go through kind of like, okay, we think this is the growth loop. We think this is the people that we're trying to reach where they are at and really go through that discovery process. So I think that's the hardest part of the early stage.
Yeah, definitely. You have to have, even in the later stages, you have to get the buy-in from the C-level and leadership. Yeah. Otherwise, it gets really difficult to go forward. Sure. Marcelo here asks, how is the dynamics of your growth team in applied data science in growth initiatives and opportunities?
Yeah, I see data science as the like premier partner that you need to really drive, to really find the best opportunities to grow, right? The data fluency, data competency, I think is key to understand like your understanding of how your business actually grows, who's receiving value from your product, what's working versus what's not working. And so for me, I kind of think of at Facebook, we used a framework called understand, identify, and execute. And the understanding piece was really two parts. One part was user research. So really like talking to customers, customer development, really understanding the user and the why and what their pain points were. And then the other side of understand is all the data analysis. And Alex Schultz always said that data gives you the ability to empathize with your customers at scale. Right, you can really kind of understand what's going on. And so data science really plays the role of identifying opportunities that you didn't even know existed. In my organization, we have two kind of data teams. We have our analysts, and these are the ones kind of looking at funnels, trends, conversion rates, that type of thing. And then we have our data scientists who are really trying to look for correlations and kind of uncovering things that we don't even know are true, and kind of like being the pathfinders to helping us discover new opportunities. So I think anyone on the growth team, you want to have strong data chops to be able to look at reports, understand SQL, that type of thing. But having the analysis and the data science components can be really valuable additions.
One thing that we hear a lot from growth teams that are just forming our growth leaders that are coming into larger stage companies is that data is everywhere. And it's really hard to build a data set that will tell you the true numbers and where you should look at. What do you think about that? What would you tell them about that?
Yeah, so 100% true and agree. And I think it's also not a binary thing. It's always a continuum, right? So even at Facebook, you'd want to look at it like a given funnel, and you're like, oh, this is missing the logging data here. So we have to add the logging data, wait for some time to collect the data, and then go understand it. So no company, I think, is ever done with getting this like perfect. It's just a maturity continuum. So I think one of the big premises for me around growth is that you have to understand at any given time what your limiting step is, right? Like what's the biggest pain point in your funnel, and not just for your users, but for your growth team, right? So if data access and availability is your number one bottleneck, you should go solve that first, right? Or you need to go try to solve that first. So like if you have a couple of engineers and they're working on landing page tests, but because you don't have access to the data warehouse, or your data isn't formatted in a way, or you don't have the event logging to actually know with what you're doing is working or not, like stop the conversion rate optimization, put in the logging, and then start the conversion rate optimization. So really like being very structured and understanding your own bottlenecks and going and running those down is really important.
Yeah, and sometimes these tasks, these bottlenecks will take some time to get solved. And I think that's important to set the expectations right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to make sure that you can still be effective and work, but you want to be very clear with people like what your limitations are. You want to pick the best thing that you can work towards in the meantime, but you don't want to live with the pain forever, right? So I think a lot of us, like if you hurt your wrist or something like that, right? Immediately you'll be aware of it. But if it continues to hurt, you just kind of get used to living with your wrist being in pain, right? And your body kind of forgets about it. Maybe you move it around in like an extreme way and you feel it again, but you kind of get numb to the pain. And growth teams get numb to the lack of data or the lack of understanding. And so they kind of, it's like human nature to give up and just accept that as reality. And I think the best teams that, continue to push to like change that reality, even while trying to do the rest of their work. So it's just like, don't settle if you don't have what you need. Continue to make the case and keep trying to get what you need to get the full picture.
That's awesome. And Farah here has a follow-up question. How can a startup with limited funding do more market research and analysis to find out how its customers use the product? Especially, and now it's a catch, if the product is physical, it can't be tracked online.
Yeah. So I think the best news is that every day the ability to hear from customers and talk to customers gets easier and easier and less expensive, right? Like if you think back 30, 40, 50 years, if you're a consumer packaged goods company and you want to get user feedback on the toothpaste that you sell or the bicycle that you sell or whatever, you need to hire a research firm to go out and do these things. You need hundreds of thousands of dollars. But today, there's lots of low-cost ways where you can do this. So obviously, online reviews is a great way to kind of get that feedback. If you're selling your product online, if it's on a marketplace, usually those marketplaces have reviews. You can read that user feedback there. You can read competitive products, user feedback, see what the differences are. One of the best parts about user reviews is you can understand how your users think about the product and also how they explain the product and what it's valuable for, which really can help inform your marketing and some of your tests around value proposition and that type of thing. If you aren't getting a lot of reviews, see if you can add a review section to your website, right? And kind of like create that channel to collect that feedback for free. Obviously, you can set up social media search terms and Google alerts and that type of thing to see if you can find communities, Facebook groups, subreddits where people are talking about these things. So, and then there are, if you don't have that kind of inbound information because you haven't reached a critical mass, there are services like SurveyMonkey and others where, there are consumer panels that you could send some of your product to, get their feedback on. So there's kind of a many different ways to go about it, even if you don't have a big budget.
Wow, so many ways. And so not doing is not possible. You can't do it. It's harder for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's got to be a way.
There is one here. How would you approach growth hacking for B2B or B2C temporary staff booking platform marketplace? That's a loaded one.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think so. Marketplace growth is a particular type of growth, and you really need to understand the dynamics of supply growth and demand growth, right? So, and then basically the way that the marketplace grows is that the network effect interaction between those two things is really the engine that drives these things forward. So if you're thinking about temporary staff booking platform, you need to think about what's the supply that you need first. Do you need qualified candidates first so that you can attract companies, or do you need companies to attract the qualified candidates, right? And so first of all, figure out which side is the supply and which side is the demand. If I had to guess, you probably want to aggregate a bunch of qualified people and then attract companies to join the marketplace to hire them, but I could be wrong. And then, so what you want to do is think through, okay, usually the easiest thing to quote unquote hack or grow is the supply side of things, not necessarily the demand side, right? So then you kind of want to think through, oh, if I do need lots of qualified people, how can I bootstrap that supply so that I then have something to go market as an asset to these companies that may want to hire them? And so there's lots of ways you could think about bootstrapping supply of people looking for work, from some of the other big networks that exist out there, some of the other big sites that exist out there. There's lots of people with lots of profiles on Glassdoor, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. But it's really kind of fundamentally understanding how marketplaces grow, and then really understanding, okay, from the supply side, how do I bootstrap that and get that flywheel going?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I mean, you can find qualified people to work for great companies and great demand. The other way around is always harder. So definitely right. there is a concierge MVP approach, and then there is the growth and even bigger approach. We talked about data before, and you mentioned data science. So Ollie here wants to know, how is machine learning and artificial intelligence being used for growth hacking today?
Yeah, I think this is one of the great innovation areas that's kind of happening right now. And you hear a lot about it in terms of like testing and kind of like, automated generation of like test variants and that type of thing. But I actually think where the most interesting stuff that's happening like very practically right now is in a lot of the targeting, propensity models, recommendation, and relevance systems. So for example, lots of companies are now using machine learning, deep learning, whatever, to build propensity models to identify customers on the web to target with ads based on the attributes of their previous successful customers, and using those propensity scores as modifiers into their bidding and acquisition strategies and paid media and so on and so forth. Ranking and relevance is really important across a whole host of activation and retention dimensions. So you can imagine if you're trying to have people invite their friends, if you can do a better job of ranking the potential candidates to invite based on their likelihood to convert, you can drive the viral referral loop that way. Or if there are a set of things that someone needs to do when they get to your product to be successful, and you can create a recommendation engine or a ranking system based on how that customer appears based on your past customer behavior, you can do a better job ranking those next actions and making them more successful. So yeah, I think recommendation systems, propensity models, and relevance are all really interesting uses and applications of machine learning and growth right now.
Are you using any of them currently?
Yeah, so at Facebook, I had a team of 20 ML engineers that were working primarily on that stuff. And at Shopify, we have ML engineers working on, lots of these things.
That's exciting. More on the other more organization level of questions, Natalia here asks, could you please walk us through the process of defining growth goals, KRs? She did not mention the North Star metric, but I'm curious also to learn if you use it and how you use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we use a North Star metric. So really the idea of a North Star metric is the best way to measure if the people that you're trying to reach are getting value from your product, right? And like, what does that mean? So for example, Airbnb is nights booked. At Shopify, my team is really focused on active merchants, the number of merchants that are using Shopify to run their business. That's not a lifetime value goal. That's not a revenue goal. That is really about, okay, we want to empower entrepreneurs everywhere to find economic independence for themselves and whatever that means around the world. So we want to expand the opportunity of entrepreneurship. We want to make commerce better for everyone everywhere. And we want to make the idea of being your own business owner as easy and as accessible as possible, because we think when people can take the reins of their economic outcomes, that's net good for the world. And so we think about that overall mission and concept through the lens of, okay, if people are choosing to use Shopify and stick with it, usually you don't pay for stuff you don't get value from. And so we see that as kind of an initial lens of like, okay, growing this base is really important to fulfilling Shopify's mission overall. And so we have a kind of a North Star metric for our team. And that's the thing we're laser focused on. Now we can break down that goal into like the number of merchants that we get, the number of merchants that are out there in the addressable market, the number that decided to stop using Shopify, the number that try Shopify and decide it's not right for them. And so you can really start to break down this North Star metric into these key results and operational metrics for the different teams. And in the best case, your operational metrics and key results are, ladder up into this North Star. So the North Star helps point everyone to the end goal. It's stated in terms of ideally the value you deliver, not the value that you extract from people, right? Kind of, you want it to be framed in, hey, we're delivering more value to the people we're trying to deliver value to. And then the team's key results and objectives are the operational metrics that are inputs into that North Star that allow them to control and optimize for those things that drive the North Star metric.
That's a great answer. And it seems really streamlined the way you explain it. On a daily basis, it gets a little bit complex if you're using OKRs for the whole company, and only growth is overseeing the North Star, right? So that's why growth needs to be, it cannot be a siloed discipline within the company.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you need to make sure that people, if you said, hey, this is our North Star, like, you should ask people, do you agree with that? And like at Shopify, for example, there's many marketing teams. We have Shopify Plus. We have all of our product marketing teams for Shop Pay and Shop App and Shipping and Fulfillment Network. We have our brand and communications team. So we have PR. All of these teams play critical functions towards driving this mission. But our piece of that puzzle is this active merchant base. And so we don't worry about how many people are using Shop App or whatever, because there's other teams that are dedicated towards that. And their North Star is going to be different from ours, which is okay, because they are all inputs into the global Shopify mission.
Yeah, we have another, speaking of Shopify, we have another question regarding Shopify's growth in the last year in 2020. Christian here wants to know if that growth from last year was considered organic, and how will your team leverage paid media to maintain Shopify's growth?
For sure. It's a great question. Yeah, obviously the effects of the pandemic changed a lot of things across how all of us live. And so, and our behaviors. And so at a macro level, yeah, we saw, across the board, huge shifts from in-person commerce to e-commerce, and right, people spending more of their money online. And so, and a lot of, so we see like huge growth there, and retailers, businesses understood and saw this transition and had to respond as well, right? So if your city is in a lockdown, and you're a small business owner, how are you going to continue to survive, to keep your business going, to feed your family? And so we saw a lot of what Shopify calls resilient retailers move online very quickly to get their stores set up. And so, I think you have changing consumer trends, which are just accelerated in e-commerce. You have the realization of many business owners that, they have to get online to kind of continue to keep their businesses going in spite of all these really hard challenges. And I think one of the most promising things that we saw is that as people shifted more of their spend online, they also were very cognizant of where they wanted to spend their money. Like, I think the pandemic kind of taught us, like, hey, these small businesses that are in our main streets in our towns and that type of thing are part of the fabric of our community. They provide a great service. And so rather than just go online and spend money with like a big box retailer or whatever, they're like, hey, I actually want to support this local entrepreneur because I've gone there for 20 years to get my coffee, and I want to, or, to kind of go get my groceries, and I want to see them continues to succeed. And so we saw a lot of behavior shift just there. Specifically about Shopify's growth, growth across all channels. So paid acquisition is important to us. Organic and SEO is really important to us. And also our merchant satisfaction, right? Like the Shopify grows a lot through word of mouth, where entrepreneurs find success with Shopify, like the tools. It's easy for them to set up and grow their business. And so we're always very cognizant of that part of the flywheel as well. But paid certainly plays a role in what we do.
There's another question here about Shopify, and it comes from a team of 10 engineers. We look to build an app for e-commerce owners. I want to ask you what's next after Shopify App Store. They are looking for a new wave to build an app that can scale in that field, in that market.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm super excited that you're interested in this and the Shopify App Store. And for those of you that don't know, Shopify is a big ecosystem, right? So we have kind of the base online store and products, but a lot of the benefits come from app developers that create apps and plugins for Shopify that help businesses address their specific needs. And so, I can't give away any like things that aren't like well known, but I would say stay tuned. There's lots of excitement and energy around the App Store in the coming years. And perhaps maybe offline, I can connect you to some folks in that team that can talk more specifically about it. But I think one thing to kind of keep in mind is that the number one pain point for entrepreneurs is how do they get more customers, right? So they have the same challenges that all of us have. So they're kind of looking for tools and services that help them figure out, where are my customers? How do I engage with them? How do I convert more of them? How do I understand what's working and what's not? And so, apps in that vein certainly go a long way to helping solve those pain points. But yeah, maybe if you DM me on LinkedIn or Facebook, happy to connect you with some other folks.
What a great opportunity. So we have two questions here that are related on different sides of the table, really. One is from Bogdan. He's wants to know how to look for and how to interview ahead of growth. So I imagine he must be a founder or an executive in a company, and he wants to build a growth team, and he wants someone to lead that team. What should he look for? Who should he look for?
This kind of goes back. It's really interesting. So as kind of the notion of growth has really exploded in popularity, lots of people have added growth to their titles. and it makes sense. Like I totally get it. But I think what that does is it creates a lot of noise and confusion. It's hard to really sort through who actually like understands the growth process and versus maybe someone who's just more performance driven or whatever. And so what I try to do is a couple things. One, just demonstrated experience first and foremost. Like a lot of product managers in interviews go through a case study where they have to take a product they built, they have to explain why they built it, how it worked, what happened, what they learned, all of that. And so I actually think a case study question or two is really important in trying to find a head of growth so that you can get some of the demonstrated expertise and experience. Like, give me some cases, tell me what worked, tell me how you did it, tell me what didn't work, what you learned, and really have that. The second thing I really want to understand is their ability to, their strength of structured thinking, right? Kind of given an ambiguous problem space, how do they go about breaking it down and figuring out what the first best thing to do is? So for these, I like to give a question that's more open-ended. Like, say you were in charge of growing TikTok in a brand new country. How would you do it, right? Or take any app or any product, something that's related to you, and ask for, like, pose those hypothetical questions. And what you're looking for is not necessarily that you're not looking for like the perfect answer, but you're looking for a way of thinking, which is very structured and methodical and well-reasoned, because this gives you the kind of an insight into their strength of like their logical reasoning, which I think is really important for growth. The third thing is like technical and data fluency. So, for some roles, it's like, hey, can you get through a SQL exercise? Can you pass like a kind of a SQL coding challenge? So kind of like trying to figure out ways to measure that. And then I think you also really want to know if they have that resilience, that grit. Tell me a time, when things went horribly wrong and how'd you get through it and what'd you do? And so I think, so those are a few of the ways that I test for folks that I'm trying to hire.
Awesome. And on the other side of the table, we have here Adrian wanting to learn more. What do you recommend to anyone working on growth marketing? And he wants to achieve breakout success in his career. So how can he learn more? How can he become the best in his field?
Yeah. So I think there's a few key things. One, you want some baseline knowledge. So you want to understand how growth works. You want to understand like the key inputs into it, the key levers of it. And you can do this. There's like so much great online education, like Growth Hackers is a great spot to start. But there's lots of ways to just build online knowledge. And you won't find this information in a degree program today. So you really want to look for the communities, look for the online courses with people that are well respected and get the fundamentals of growth, like understand actually what we're talking about when we say growth. The second thing is technical skills. So yeah, use Udemy and take the SQL course on there. Practice HTML, building landing pages, try Figma, get familiar with some of the tools that are really important, particularly to digital growth. Use an email marketing tool, figure out how it works. So that's technical capability. And then the third component is practice, right? Like growth is a practice. It's kind of like law or medicine, right? Like a law office is a practice. A doctor practices medicine. You have to practice growth. You can't get it out of a blog post or a book. You have to try and do it. And so you can do this. The best news is you can do this super easy these days at very low cost. Like you can start a Shopify store for almost nothing. You can drop ship products and you can see if you can grow an audience. You can start an Instagram account. You can start a podcast. You can start a Substack newsletter. There's all these things that you can try and practice these different skills to grow these assets. And then I think the last piece is try to find companies where they're doing it well, where the product has strong product market fit, where they have an appreciation and approach to growth that you can go and learn from, because that will just accelerate your learning curve on top of those other three main things that I would work on.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I really love to read in a resume when we're hiring here at Growth Hackers is personal stories of growth in different areas that we wouldn't imagine. So I launched this project during college with my roommate, and we grew to have a bunch of thousands of other students. And you notice there that people are actually practicing, and the way they think, they can definitely apply that to their growth tasks, their everyday, in their routine. So I love hearing those stories, that podcast, that personal blog, or etc.
Really 100% agree. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and we have another, going back a little bit on the growth process and how you apply it. Oliver here wants to know, when identifying growth levers, what level of confidence do you wish to gain before implementing a particular strategy? How do you approach growth levers?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think it really comes down to a couple of key dimensions. So you basically want to take the impact and certainty dimensions, and you can kind of plot them out, right? So if you have like high impact idea, like, so if you know your levers, like for example, if you know from past experiments or whatever that these things really matter to the business, then you're looking for the highest impact ones in that category. And those ideas, like, you should do kind of instantly. So that requires a few prerequisites. One, you need to understand how your business grows. And you need to understand how that channel or that growth loop applies to your business. And then you need to understand within that growth loop what the key points of leverage are. And if you know those and you have demonstrated that in the past, then it's really easy to double down in that area with high confidence based on what you think you can get further out of that lever, right? So if you realize that, hey, making, like you're kind of optimizing the speed of your app, right? And like, or the sign up flow, kind of the responsiveness and the performance. And you're like, hey, if we can make the sign up flow 10% faster, we see this lift in conversion rate. Well, if we can make it another 10% faster, we can probably get another lift. We should keep doubling down on what we know that works. So knowing that system and those leverage points are really important. When we are looking at brand new ideas, the first question I ask is like, hey, is this a new idea that will enhance or improve one of our existing growth loops or growth engines? Or is this an idea that tries to establish and create a brand new growth loop or engine? And if it's one that enhances or improves the performance of an existing growth engine, then you're really trying to say like, okay, that makes sense because our business already grows that way. And then I just need to know if that really is the most impactful thing we can do there versus all the other things we can do. So I still need more information than maybe the double down list of things, but at least I know it's generally about accelerating or expanding one of the ways that I currently grow. Mm-hmm. If it's something brand new that is like not an existing growth engine or loop, is a whole new way and experiment, then I'm going to want a bunch of information and backing data that suggests that we should do it, because often our existing growth loops are not performing as well as they could. There's another adjacent audience or segment that we could try expanding that existing loop into. And so if we're going to try something very net new, like 0 to 1 idea, I want to have a lot of confidence that, yes, that is like, because it takes a lot of work to launch something brand new. And then it takes a lot of work to make it work. Like launching is just a milestone. It's not a goal, right? You launch something, the goal is impact. And so once you launch something brand new, you then have the cost of maintaining it, making it work better, and so on and so forth. So I think we tend to underestimate the cost of brand new initiatives. And so knowing that I want a lot more confidence in like those brand new initiatives through
That's
user research opportunities.
Makes a lot of sense for product, and it is hard on a product point of view, but on a growth point of view, yeah, still, even if it works, does it work to the point of investing that much? Does it pay for itself? It will excel? We definitely don't know. Yeah, and sometimes people are so attracted to the empty envelope, right? Do you feel that in some teams, like the empty envelope seems like so alluring comparing to optimizing the wheels you already have working?
Yeah, I totally agree. And then I think if it is a brand new strategy, I think it's really important to, before you start, identify what is like the first question you need to answer about that strategy. Like that strategy is based on a set of assumptions that you have. And of those assumptions, what is the riskiest one? And what is the one you should answer first? And then your first set of work really should just be to see if you can answer that question with clarity before you go on and try to execute the rest of the strategy.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions here. I think we have a few minutes still, so maybe we can make that work. Let's try at least one more. Let me see here. We have, one that is very connected to another one we had on products that are offline, but this from Thorsten is how can you list some B2B industrial or non-SaaS, non-e-commerce companies that are have integrated growth hacking or growth marketing processes? We get this question a lot here, Morgan.
Of course.
Old school companies using growth as a framework to expand their services, expand their markets, etc. What do you think about that? And who do you know that is doing well?
For sure. So I think if you go kind of to this basic principle that every company will ultimately be a technology company, then every company will ultimately have a need for the growth process, the agile iterative development. Right. And so every industry is at a different stage in that adoption curve, but every step they take forward on that adoption curve of adopting technology creates a need and a essential need to kind of like figure out what's working and how to make the most of that shift and that change. And so, I've seen lots of, and then there's many ways to think about iterative learning, right? So growth and the growth hacking process is one. There's Agile, there's Scrum, there's total quality management. There's so many of these frameworks, which really all share the same common attributes of a feedback loop, where you're not just launching and forgetting, but you're actually like constantly trying to improve. Kaizen is kind of maybe the original, one of the earliest of these concepts. And so specifically in industries, I think one great example is, Taco Bell, which is a huge fast food chain here in the United States. Their headquarters are actually right down the street from me here in Southern California. And they built 2 test Taco Bells right outside their headquarters, where they're trying new menu items all the time. And they are rapidly testing. So it's different menu items than you can find at the other Taco Bells, and they're rapidly testing their products there. And it's right next to headquarters, so their executives can go in and try the food and get fast feedback, and it's connected to their test kitchens and all of that type of thing. And so they're using a very similar idea and methodology. And one of the breakout hits from that process was like the Doritos Locos Taco, which kind of was a huge smash. But I think you're seeing it in legacy companies. You're seeing it in the digital arms of like these big conglomerates. For example, Disney and Disney Plus. Disney Plus is a digital product, but they are investing a ton of money to reinvent the entire Disney kind of ecosystem and value proposition. And their marketing teams and their growth teams are running some fascinating experiments. One of my favorites was they just launched like a baby name glossary, which is helping them create a massive retargeting audience of parents for targeting Disney Plus. And I think you hear about these types of things in everything from manufacturing to professional services, and so on to, kind of fast food. So yeah, there's definitely, and people are at different stages, but it's definitely things that are happening everywhere.
I don't know if Thorsten here, who asked the question, watch it, but we did an AMA a few months ago with the head of growth at Volvo Cars, and Volvo is a 100-year-old company, and they just launched a new business based on the growth framework methodology. They tested a bunch of things, and they found out a brand new product, which is a SaaS product.
Yeah.
Subscription
awesome.
for a car and auto company. So yeah, that's really exciting. I was thinking of my fridge here. We're all at home. Time like this. My fridge is a SaaS business now. The manufacturer installed these filters for water, and I have to pay them every month, just like a subscription of a software. So definitely every business is a tech business, is a subscription business potentially. I definitely agree. So thanks so much, Morgan, for being here with us today. We still have a couple of questions to go, but we'll catch up on next time. And I saw that you are on Clubhouse too. I just followed you. Maybe we can continue this conversation there.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be super fun for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you too. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.